karakia timanga. Kahikitea, kahikitea, hikitea. Whakarewa ki rongarawa. E rea kia kore e hoki whakamuri mai. O aua atu te pumanawa Māori. E mana tikanga. Me te uri o maia. O puia nā mukupuna. Nā rangatira mo apopo. Ka tihei, tihei, tihei Māori ora.
Kia ora. Mihi nui ki a koe e Shane. Mihi nui ki a koutou katoa. Ka mihi ki a rangi nui ki a papa tuanuku hoki. The source of all our nourishment. And mihi to the beauty of this day and to the mauri of the whenua that each of us belong to and are sitting on today. So welcome everybody. I'm Heidi Martin and I'm one of the panelists of this rōpū, and we've been invited to share our different thoughts and perspectives on the topic of youth and public or community empowerment. And we can all see and hear the really strong calls, can't we? Calls for change that are coming from rangatahi and young people all across our country and all around the world right now. And we also know that there are many people and communities and groups of all ages who've been working in empowered ways to create a more healthy, sustainable world for a long time. So this panel is here to share thoughts and ideas about that, and also how do we harness the experience of this rising energy. We're going to hear from each of us about that. So I'm mihi to the wisdom and experiences of this group. There are 6 of us here today and one in a pre-recorded video. And we were going to go around each panelist to share, and each panelist will pass to the next one. And then if we have time for an open kōrero at the end, then we will do that as well. So mihi nui ki a koutou, and I'd like to hand over to Hana Rāwhiti. Kia ora, Hana.
Ka paripare ka whakaruru hau tēnā rā tātou katoa. Ko Hana Rāwhiti tōku ingoa, he uri tēnei no wāhi pā mea tioha ki marae ki rāhui pōkeka. Tikau mai wau koutou I kuraina au ki roto I ngā kura Māori ki te kohanga reo, waihoki ki te whare kura o rā kaumanga. Ki reira I tipu te aroha me te pūmanoa o te reo Māori mai o kururuhi me o korohiki. Hello everyone, my name's Johan. I'm 19 years old and I don't have a flash PhD degree, none of that. I'm literally just a girl from Huntly, and ngā kaunui anau ki tōku reo Māori me tōku ahu reo Māori. So I'm really privileged to be on this talk and around in this space today, and around the topic of youth and public engagement. I'll start off with this kōrero that was in an article, and it was someone who said that they're really concerned around the behaviour and the acts of youth today. But that article was actually written in 1640 by a Governor General. So that's how long and that's how much, I guess, it will always be the youth that are at the front line of wanting change and wanting to have it better, or wanting to, it's never going to stop. The youth are never going to stop. So a bit of background about myself in youth space. I think I don't want to talk about myself either. The first kōrero that I want to talk about is maramataka, our marama for today, which is we've just come out of whiro, which was yesterday, our new moon. And today is te reo. So koira kia pune whakaro, koira te reo tuatahi o te marama, te reo. So something you could say is this space and this kōrero is like the first talk of today, te reo. Te reo can be quite a low energy phase, so if my Wi-Fi cuts out, that's te reo telling me to shush. So I'll talk about a little kōrero about youth, I guess. I don't know how to put this, but a rangatira to me is Kendrick Lamar, and ko tōna kupu is sit down and be humble. But in this year, we in the Kōrero of Māori wards, the kaupapa of Māori wards, I went with my grandfather Taitamu to support him, but I was actually just his driver. I don't even think he was invited to the hui, hiawi. This was about standing up for Māori wards. He wasn't invited, I wasn't invited, I just happened to be the driver. At the end of the day, I ended up speaking on behalf of my own whakaaro about how it was so important that we have a Māori voice at this table. And this guy, his name was Wilson, and I always talk about this guy who I have a lot of respect for, Ewan Wilson, and he questioned me on what is mana motuhake. Well, mana motuhake to me is knowing the assets that you already have that aren't materialistic. And that is knowing that I've got te reo Māori, I've got a kura, I'm able to train every day, and I have a huge marakai, and those are things that aren't materialistic, but they're our own mana motuhake assets that he won't be able to do. So yes, I can read, write, and do 2 + 2 maths, but we can also navigate the tides, we can also read the phases of the moon, and we can also tell the star navigations throughout the sky. And that's something that this new generation, through decolonisation of going through wharekura and having the likes of Matua Hotu, Matua Shane, fighting for our Indigenous knowledge through youth. And after that, the second hui that we were probably invited to again is that Ewan actually came up to me, and he's gone on to his own journey of learning his culture and te ao Māori. And it's not about Māori want to be here, we want to be at the front of the line, look at me, look at me. It's not about that. It's about understanding that we can walk and work in both worlds. I have an arm and a leg on this side, and I have an arm and a leg on this side, and they both walk perfectly balanced together. And that's what I think that our generation, particularly going through kohanga and wharekura, are able to do now that we have maths class, but then we also can go down to the Tuna Creek and stuff like that. So in a nutshell, koira taku āhuatanga, taku tirohanga o tēnei ao hurihuri, tēnei ao rangatahi, tēnei ao mohoa. So koira aku, that's all I have to say. Don't want to talk too long. And I'll give the raka over to you, Hannah.
Kia ora, Hannah, for your whakaaro. Tēnā koutou katoa, tūranga tangatarite, tūranga araro, tūranga makaurau, tūranga nui a kiwae. Ko Hannah Hagen toku ingoa, he mokopuna ahau o te tai rāwhiti, o te atanga a māhaki ko rongo whakata o kunei iwi, I te taha o tōku pāpā no Scotland, Melrose Ear. Kia ora everyone, my name is Hannah Hagen. I'm from Scotland and the east coast of Aotearoa. I'm 17 years old, and I've just finished my first year here at the University of Waikato, doing a Bachelor of Social Sciences, majoring in political science and Māori and Indigenous studies. I work for GoEco, Waikato's Environment Centre, as a climate organiser, and I'm also involved in several regional climate action projects. Most predominantly, I'm co-chair of Rangatahi Voices, a regional organisation that empowers youth to share their voices on the issues that matter to them. I'm passionate about creating a safe climate future for everyone, and I believe we can do this by challenging the status quo through transformative and creative collective action. I'm really excited to be here today to discuss the importance of youth within climate action. Including our Indigenous rangatahi, our takatapui rangatahi, and our disabled whānau. I'd like to begin by discussing the thing that often comes up for me when I'm navigating these spaces in the climate action as a young person. And it's often that I'm perplexed by the division climate change creates between generations. Because in my understanding, there are only a few things that are shared amongst all of humanity, that's something that everyone can relate to. And I believe that we're lucky enough that youthfulness is one of those things that it is something that every human begins with, something that we can all share, all understand, and all relate to. Yet it is creating this, climate change creates this divisions between generations. And I believe that means that we are missing out on the value of young people. We're missing out on the value of young people when we are dismissing them, tokenizing them, or dividing ourselves. Because within the context of the climate crisis, rangatahi can teach us where to go, because we have the ability to question, critique, and analyze the world around us. And this is what we're seeing around the world. Young people are rising up for climate justice because we are using our young eyes to see the injustice of climate change, but also the opportunity it poses for a better future, for our future. I'd also like to note that what I'm talking about and what we will talk about is already understood within the cultural value of whakapapa. Whakapapa already encapsulates the importance of empowering young people and the connection between generations. This concept understands that we are nothing without each other, and without young people, there is nothing that can be passed on. Whakapapa also enables us to look back into the past and into the future, so we can look back to see the young people who have become old and then what they have passed on, and we are able to see the future through ourselves and what we want to pass on as we grow older. So yeah, I think I'll stop here. I'm looking forward to exploring those ideas a bit more later and more of a group kōrero. Those are just some of my initial that's some of my initial kōrero on whakaaro, and I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone else's, and I'll pass it on to the next person. Kia ora.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shalini. I am a scholar under the Zenadesh Fellowship in Sustainable Development at University of Waikato. My research looks at the conditions and factors that create active and engaged young citizens, particularly the kind of sustainable citizens that are needed as we face the threats of climate change. This was important to me, especially as I come from the Maldives, a small island developing state, which is a group of countries that are at most risk to the effects of climate change. Just to give you some information about Maldives, it is a country of approximately 1,190 islands in the Indian Ocean, with a population of slightly over 400,000 people. Just to highlight the vulnerability of the country, only 1% of the geographical area is land, as the islands are so small. The smallness of the islands also means that housing and all the critical infrastructure are within about 100 meters of the ocean. They are also quite flat, with a majority, over 80% of the islands being in fact less than 1 meter above sea level. The most recent natural disaster, the most extreme natural disaster Maldives experienced in recent history was the Indian Ocean tsunami, which impacted the whole country, and also the islands that were most affected needed resettlement. Currently, a mixture of human and natural factors impact the islands. For example, one of the biggest challenges we face is sand erosion. As a result, we are losing a lot of our land, particularly because of development practices, such as land reclamation to increase the size of the islands, and also building of harbors, which destroy a lot of the reefs, which is the natural protective mechanism that we have. So even though sand erosion is a natural process, these kinds of human-made practices are impacting the natural flow of erosion and making us lose more land than we would naturally would. as we all know in Maldives and also elsewhere, sustainable development is hard to achieve when there are conflicting forces against it, particularly business interests that are well-funded with, well access to decision making. As a result, environmental activism in recent times have become political. And also because particularly the younger generation are much more concerned about the adverse effects both that are happening now as well as that what will happen in the future. However, more of such informed and concerned citizenry are needed to be active, as they are standing up to those who have more power relatively. I feel like there needs to be two things that should be happening concurrently. Firstly, there needs to be more pressure put upon politicians and decision makers to meet their environmental commitments. And secondly, there needs to be more opportunities and support created to foster the kind of citizens that demand such change. The purpose of my research was to look at environmentally engaged, active young citizens to see what were the kind of factors and experiences that motivate them in their activism, so that those kinds of factors could be highlighted and promoted to create those kinds of young activists. Just to summarize, exposure to natural environments played a great part in young people appreciating nature, getting to know the importance and impact of nature to their everyday lives. Unfortunately, our increasingly urban lifestyles and urban migration is affecting much of these interactions and viewing nature as something other than or something separate from us. But as effects of environmental degradation is showing us, and particularly as Indigenous activists have been saying throughout, this is clearly not the case, and it is not feasible to think so. Another factor that was highlighted was the importance of role models and access to networks. Fortunately, with the advent of social media and connecting people across different countries was quite advantageous, especially to Maldivian activists as well, because it created a unified cause, even though they were being active locally. Seeing other young people being active is inspiring. It also shows them that even though they are young, they also have a voice and they also have a role. And also access to such networks gives them information and support networks. Support networks are being increasingly important because climate anxiety is a real thing. And a lot of the young people that I spoke to were emotionally impacted by the stress of thinking about their futures. Spaces where alternative views on development and sustainability, what development means, was very important, because just to counter the mainstream growth emphasized view of development. This was facilitated by schools, universities, NGOs, sometimes local councils. Of course, these spaces needs to be genuine and not just tokenistic, and genuinely equipped with giving young people factual information. As we know, information is now kind of a weapon because there's so much needed to counter the kind of lies that are propagated currently. And also these kinds of spaces needs to genuinely give young people an opportunity to have their say in the decisions that are being made, particularly in the case of local planning or development planning nationally or at local level. Young people being active in environmental causes is not new. They have been vocal in such causes within their respective localities, and also speaking out in different global platforms for decades. The difference now is the unified nature of the current movement, assisted once again by the modern communication technologies, with young people from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, and a more inclusive nature of this movement. Of course, more work needs to be done still to be more inclusive, particularly in the case of marginalized groups, of indigenous groups, groups from what we know as the global South. And also the important thing is not to write them off as a trend, and take what they're saying seriously, because as a matter of fact, they're much more informed and committed than some of the leaders today, and much more well-meaning as well, and they have much more to lose, literally. And speaking of leaders, and also not to treat them as leaders of tomorrow, and treat them as some people who are in training, because they are the leaders of today, because the kind of change that they are asking for is important to avoid or minimize the adverse effects of what is going to happen, not just what is going to happen in the future, but what people are experiencing today, because it is happening right now. So, thank you.
Okay. Kia ora koutou. Ko wai au, ko Meredith aku ata bound tuku ingoa, ko Turanga Nui a Kiwa ahau. Ka pū te ruha, ka hao te rangatahi. Was a whakatauki that when I was working in a youth court space, the judge at the time used that framework to discuss this construct of the old net being cast aside in the new. And the new thinking of our young people, because we know that most young people are impacted by systems that technically they haven't created or they haven't been a part of, and one is local democracy. So I'm sharing today, I guess, as a Gisborne District Councillor who has seen change happen in regards to those who have come to the tables of governance. Because as we know, these are spaces that talk a lot about infrastructure, parks, reserves, sports, a whole range of constructs that really impact young people and the involvement in their communities. Much of my life was spent working with our young people in Tairawhiti, and it was a privilege and an honour to serve them in that space. And I really respect the opportunity I get to talk with young people. So as a local governor, one of the things that you notice in respect to being at council tables is that they were often made up of, or in my councils, particularly at the starting of my career in this space, the average age of a district councillor was 68. And so that had been kind of the rhetoric and the known facts for the whole of councils throughout New Zealand. So I did set about in my task to how do I get young people empowered or have access to that decision-making table. So one of the frameworks was to work towards having a local Gisborne District Youth Council, which I was very passionate about. But and again, one of the constructs that a number of our young people, kia ora to you for your kōrero today, have talked about is this intergenerational shifting. And I love, Hana, how you talk about the mātauranga and the maramataka, all the things that technically in my time life, I didn't get I didn't get the benefits and the bonuses of knowing that kōrero based on my upbringing, and I've had to fight some anger, some sadness and all that to get to a point now where I embrace all I learned from those rangatahi who are learning through kura kaupapa. So kia ora to you, Hannah. To you, Hannah, too, I just love that you said something, Hannah, you discussed that your generation walks between the worlds better probably than other generations have, based on your truth and your pride and your mana, and I just really love that. And Hannah, you talked too about generations and whakapapa too, and that gives you the impetus to think about, because from a Māori perspective, we do think about our tūpuna and our mokopuna. You don't escape that framework as Māori, and it's a cultural construct that I respect wholly, having not been raised in it. So how do I empower young people? Well, everyone has a story, and I'm a passionate narrator of stories and listener of stories and a collector of stories. And so in my time with local government, I realised we make decisions to build and make things, but we don't often ask the young people that we're making them for if this is what they want. So we don't generally, we do an engagement space where we go out into communities, but unless you are connected to young people, unless you're someone that young people would like to talk to because you have a rapport, or you generally don't get them at those tables. I've done a number of wonderful kind of impact projects in my region where I have gone and talked with young people, not at them or to them, but with them, to understand what their needs are in my region. So fighting for a youth council was fascinating in that debate, because I did have a generation say, oh, we don't need young people, old people, you know, they were really anti-groups. And I was like, this is a group. So I think intergenerationally, why we desperately need to empower our young people to have them participate is because simply they will inherit all the decisions that we make. And it's a vital impacting kind of resource to have if we've got young people right there saying, oh, actually, did you think about this? Have you thought about these things? So I really value young people's thoughts because they think outside the box, they think laterally, they just think in such dynamic ways. And I always remind older people, you were young once. And I think some old people forget that and they get stuck. And so young people remind us that in our youth, what were we passionate about? And I think for me as a local governor in my council, I just really want to see more young people have access to the decision-making tables and having the freedom to come and speak their views and their thoughts. I really want them to participate in democracy because I value their citizenship. And I think we shouldn't just value you when you turn 18 and then you can vote. It's actually about valuing you from the time you arrive on the planet and actually seeing your future right from the get-go. And I value that. I want to protect young people's voices because often they have got people who are naysayers to, you don't know, you don't understand. In actual fact, you know more and you understand more than a lot of people give you credit for. And those partnerships with you are really about us understanding that your voice, whilst you're still trying to figure out things and trying to work it out because you're still growing up and still developing your critical thinking, that we value it, that we say, thank you, because I think we need to spend more time in wānanga hui, intergenerationally, figuring out what we can do together. I'm all about participation and the common unity of the community. And my framework is around my story as a young person growing up in a very poor neighborhood, being able to achieve the things I've done because people believed in me. And I think it's our role as adults to believe in you because you carry a new world, unfortunately, that's been damaged. But I believe in the future and the hope is held with our young people and communities of interest that have undertaken to look at maramataka, mātauranga Māori, and constructs that are going back to old times, old learnings that actually are new to some, but they worked. So for me today, I just want to say I just really embrace the kōrero we're having today. And I'm a freedom writer, so I'm all about collecting stories, writing those down for change, and making a difference, not just words, but actions, because we need action. And we need it now. So kia ora to you all, and thank you for the opportunity to share. I hope I can keep doing this for the rest of my days. Ngā mihi.
Tātai, mihi ana kia tātou I tēnei rangi. Ko hotu roa taku ingoa, tupu ake au I roto I ngā whakaakoranga o aku tūpuna i roto o Waikato o Ngāti Mahuta, i roto hoki i te kingitanga mihi ana ki te kingi Māori, kia tātou hoki i tēnei rā tēnā koutou. Well, it's great to be here and listening to our young people. I used to be young once. It was good to have Meredith remind me about that. But in saying all of this, though, listening to Hannah and Hannah and their kōrero about, you know, the things that they do, there's a few things that I suppose has been a battle for us as Indigenous people over the years is the value of the knowledge of our ancestors. And so to hear Hannah talk about whakapapa and to hear Hana Rafiti talk about, you know, maramataka and all those things that are actually quite strong and powerful aspects of the world of our ancestors, made me think that probably one of the roles that I have found myself in over the years has been to try and re-establish and reignite some of that old knowledge of our ancestors and to validate it, because a lot of the time over the years, if we look at the kinds of kōrero that I remember growing up with around the way our ancestors came to Aotearoa, how they got here by accident, and they were just lucky that, you know, they had their animals and some plants and they were on a fishing trip and they got blown off course and just happened to land in Aotearoa. And the sad part about it is that what starts to happen is that there becomes a general view that an Indigenous way of looking at your world isn't actually worth anything, because it only comes from a realm of myth and legend. So we've got to what we have to do is try and do all this stuff, and I guess I have this term that I call demystify. It's to pull all of this stuff out of the realm of myth and legend and utilize it. And so a lot of the stuff that we do, I do a lot of things on waka with young people. We sail, we teach them about how to navigate a canoe over hundreds, thousands of miles of ocean, how to read all the signs of nature, how to understand the things that our ancestors understood centuries ago when they made their journeys to Aotearoa. But on top of that was all the other kind of stuff that comes with how to take care of and how to look after their world. And one of the big things that we do on our waka is that we try our best to encourage young people to understand that when we're on a canoe with about 15 or 16 of us sailing from one island to another, we might be in the ocean for 3 or 4 weeks, that waka and that space becomes our island. And so we have to do everything on board on that little island for that next few weeks that ensures our survival. And so we have to look after everything. We have to take care of everything. We have to understand the things we need to do all of this kind of stuff. And then the big job is to get people to transfer that knowledge to how they take care of things on the land. And where does that all come from? It comes from the talk of our ancestors. It comes from the talk of great people. And I think the other thing that we all forget about is that when our tupuna, this is my belief, when our tupuna jumped on a waka to sail to Aotearoa, they were all young. You know, they weren't old guys like me. They were all young people. And why? Because what I've seen in the young people that I know is that they'll do stuff that old people get a little bit nervous about doing these days. You know, young people will sit there and go, oh, let's try that, eh? And then they'll try it and it works. And then if it doesn't work, because I've seen it, then they come over and have a talk to me and say, we tried this, it didn't work. Have you got any ideas? And I say, yeah, try it this way. And it might work, it might not work. But the best thing is for you to try it out. And then what happens is that the kind of tools and the knowledge and the mātauranga that they acquire in this journey gets them to a point where they're a bit like me. or a bit like Meredith, or a bit like Shane, you know, that you have all your reality has been shaped by a lot of other people, but it's been shaped in a way that hopefully those people who've helped shape you have allowed you to do the kind of things that have allowed you to grow instead of trying to confine you to a specific way of looking at something. You know, and I have a great time. I like hanging out with young people because I learn heaps. You know, I learn heaps from young people about all kinds of different things. But when they come and hang out with me, I hope they learn some stuff too, because, you know, we sit and we have a bit of a talk and about all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm sitting here in my house looking out, and we've got a big garden. And what we've started doing with lots of young people is putting gardens all around the place. And I'm into what Hannah was saying. You know, we look at our calendar and we go, oh, this is a bit of a low energy day. Let's just chill out, eh? We won't do any gardening work today. Or we won't do this and that. And what we're starting to find is that knowledge that once was relegated into the background because it was our knowledge, is starting to become the kind of knowledge that young people are trying to look for again and utilize in their path to understanding what's going on in this world, because they're going to become the old people like us later. And I guess one of our big jobs as older people is to leave this world as good ancestors. You know, I'm pretty keen for maybe in about 50 or 100 years' time, when some young person is going to say something nice about me, because we tried hard to encourage our rangatahi to do the right stuff, to make big calls when it comes to looking after our planet, to make big calls when it comes to looking after our ocean, and make big calls when it comes to looking after our people. So I really enjoyed sitting and listening to our young people today, because the world's in their hands. You know, like I said, I've had my time. I like having discussions with them, going for sales with young people. I've got a young crew. You know, I've got people who can navigate, who can be in charge of a waka, and then they, like, I think the oldest one's like 25 or 26. And they're all in there, and they've been doing stuff with me since they've been little kids. And I just leave them to it, because they know what they're doing. They're really good at it. And they've added a lot more to what I've been able to show them. And good luck to our rangatahi. And it's great to just be sitting here and listening to you all today. Ngā mihi.
Ko waia, ko Shane Ngātai taku ingoa, tūmoaki at Road Street Kura here in Hamilton. Listening to the kōrero today, I've been really inspired. And I just want to acknowledge Shalini from the Maldives, her story, a powerful story and a real one that's happening. Also to Hannah and Hannah, listening to you and your passion and your drive, it gives me encouragement that we've got rangatahi that are on the right path. Meredith, your leadership in establishing youth councils and that is what we need across our rohe to continue this conversation. And I'm looking forward to listening to what Heidi has to say when she finishes this kōrero. But from my perspective, there's one thing I've learned working with children, and I'm talking from the age of about 3.5 through to 12 years of age for the last 40 plus years, and having 5 moko of my own, is that the one thing that we as older people can do is always, when a young person asks a question, is to respond with the answer, why not? Let's try that. Because once we open that up, our young people have far more creative minds that we once had when we were young, and they're able to impart that knowledge on us. And I'll give you a brief example. We were visiting Mangatotiri Ecological Island, which is a 42-kilometre pest-proof fenced inland island just south of Hamilton City, in Mangatotiri, south of Cambridge. And on the trip back, one of my students said to me, why do we have to travel all this way to see, from our te ao Māori, our Māori world view, to see the mara and to see our native bush? And why can't we have our own at school, was the question. And my answer was, why not? Well, 6 years later, we now have an ecological island on the back of this kura, which used to be a rugby field, which is quite sacrilege in New Zealand. You turned a rugby field into an island, then you built a pest-proof fence around it, and you left it for the next couple of years. And what's happened on that island is what's happening in all ecological spaces like that is it's returned back to its natural form because we've planted over 10,000 native trees and plants into that space. And now the students have a resource that was their idea that they created, and generationally, those students who started that island have now left, but those who are there now are learning from what the vision was from those younger students. And it's a world first. No one else has ever done that. That wouldn't have happened if we didn't have the support of organisations like Enviro Schools, funded through our regional councils. If Enviro Schools didn't exist, we wouldn't have had the support and the learning that as adults, a lot of us needed to upskill. Meredith talked about how she missed out in her education. We grow our communities by having the resources and the people that drive it. And our youth are the ones that should direct it. If it is their idea and they want to make it happen, it will happen. So if we talk about climate change and we talk about the impact of rising sea levels and the impact it's having on islands, I go back to Potero and what he said. As Māori, as our ancestors, we were on an island, we looked out, we were getting overcrowded, our resources were running out. What did we do? We upskilled ourselves with the knowledge of navigation, of what to put on our waka to survive, and taking the plants with us that we could grow when we arrived so that we could be sustainable. And we just went there. And that took a lot of courage. And we were young, our ancestors were young when they did that. It was out of necessity that they had to do something. Our youth today are not just talking about it, they're actually doing it. And they're doing it in a groundswell, which one of our speakers spoke about, the power of social media, being able to activate and inspire and encourage others to actually take a stand and do something about it. I remember in 1981, I walked on the Springbok anti-racist tours as a young person. I walked in Hamilton, I walked in Wellington, and I walked in Christchurch. I was 18 years old, and I thought, why am I doing this? And I was doing it because I believed in it, and I thought that my participation would make a difference. And it did. A very small part, but collectively, a huge impact on what happened in South Africa years later with Nelson Mandela. And that comes back to, and he acknowledged that in New Zealand, we were doing that for the rest of the world. We've done it with our nuclear free stance, right? And we need to step up with the voice of our youth to do it for now, to reduce the greenhouse emissions, to look at how we're going to tackle this problem. So I want to awhi and tautoko Hannah and Hana for their kōrero today, because what they've said is the most powerful thing that could come out of this conversation for youth around community. You can't do it on your own, but we must listen to you and capture your voice and move forward and support you with the resources that you need to be able to lead this as you are now. Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora koutou. Mihi nui kia koutou. So much of what everybody is saying is resonating with me. It's quite good going last because you get to hear everybody's passion and ideas. I'm from a group called Toimata Foundation, and we're a community group, and we're in partnership with another community group called Te Mauri Tau. And together we designed and developed these two programs, Enviro Schools and Te Aho Tūroa. And we've been doing this for about 20 years. We started this maybe 25 years ago, and when we were all pretty young. And we wanted to transform the education system. Well, I think we are transforming it in some ways, you know, the many people involved now, because I guess what we felt and what we still feel is that, you know, we hear a lot of calls for education, that we need education to solve all these different environmental issues, to make people more aware. But the kind of education that was happening around that was still very much about the mind, you know, like we just don't think we're going to think our way out of this. This is not a thing we're going to think our way out of. And the kind of education that we are working for, and that our kaupapa is about education as it's got to be an exciting learning journey. It's got to be a journey of deep experiences that touch our hearts and that enable us to feel interconnected, and that really energize us and rise, make our energy rise. And I can see that, and I can feel that when I listen to you, Hana Rafiti, and you, Hannah. You're full of rising energy. That actually that's what's going to change the situation. It's not the amount of knowledge we can stuff into our brains, is it? It's that deep connection that we can have of knowing that that we belong to the land, that the land doesn't belong to us, of knowing that the essence of ourselves as well. Something you said straight up, Hannah, about mana motahake and the assets that you have. I think we've got a real challenge in education at the moment to really nurture the whole child and the whole young person through education, and that part of the learning journey is for young people and for all of us to really understand what are the gifts and the skills that we bring, that are the essence of us, that we can contribute to this healthy, sustainable world. And that's what's so exciting about what so many young people are doing now, because it feels like you really are in touch with your gifts. You know what you're passionate about, you know what you want to contribute, and that is so fantastic, and it's so needed. I think some of the other things that is a challenge in what we call education is that we're often focusing on a whole lot of problems, and as we know, there's no end of kind of problems, or we've got climate change and biodiversity and water, but all of those from a motivation perspective it's depressing, and as Jarlene said, eco-anxiety is a thing. So we think that all education needs to have a really positive and creative focus, and that the focus is about living to create hauora. I mean, that really is the mission, creating hauora and well-being for all living things. And then all those issues and all those problems would actually go away, because hauora and wellness is what we are born for. We're born healthy and vibrant, and so we have the knowledge in our beings, in our bodies, and in nature to actually be that. So having education, I think schools and other learning opportunities, other learning places where young people need to allow young people to really explore their environment, be immersed in nature, and to take action on things that really are meaningful for them. And in that way, experiencing making change will carry on right throughout life, won't it? When I look at the people at, the older people at the COP26, and they're all just talking. I don't know that they've got the skills. I don't know that they've got the skills to actually listen to each other, empathize. Not like the young people have now. You guys really do seem to know how to empathize with a diversity of ideas, and to, the challenge is for us to weave those together, isn't it, into that world of well-being that we're looking for. So I'm pretty excited when I hear, some common threads of this kōrero about intergenerational learning, because I also have a question about it. What kind of settings do we need? What kind of opportunities do we need to have more intergenerational learning and action? Because the old wisdoms and the new innovations, and maybe the old wisdom's becoming the new innovations, it's something you mentioned, Tōturo. I think that's true. The old wisdoms of Papa Tuanuku, learning from her and learning from people who have observed and lived and been in deep connection with the environment. How do we get more of that? Especially in a world where a lot of us are living in urban situations. So just to, I suppose, from an education perspective, I believe that what some of us are working for is to really change the way we do education right from the babies. Every single age group has something really unique to offer, and has the ability to make change no matter how young. So through Enviro Schools and Te Aho Turo, that's what we're doing. And I know that there are many, many other groups trying to do this and are doing it as well. Living sustainably, practicing tikanga, and, you know, we need to connect it all up, don't we? So I'd be interested to, we have some time now to, might just put it back to you, Hannah and Hannah, to see if there's anything that you would like to do, to say, to respond to what you've heard, and if there are any questions or things you want to put back to the group. Kia ora koutou.
Yeah, kia ora everyone. For it's hard going at the start, but also quite nice to see what whakaaro flows on, and what everyone else has to say. And yeah, kia ora to everyone. I love how we integrated everyone's kōrero as we went on. I loved the kōrero about the potential that comes from the connection between the generations. Through empowering young people, we empower everybody, and sharing how there's so much knowledge that exists within the world today, and that we can just utilize that to create a better future for everyone. And it's for young people, us to recognize that and to bring that forward, and to fight and to be courageous and brave, and to keep fighting for the change that is necessary. I don't know if I have any questions for everyone. It's always like, how do we do that? How do we achieve that? How are we going to support young people? And from my perspective, that's moving beyond tokenism to genuinely empower young people. Meredith, you talked about not talking at or to, but with, and to genuinely implement that, because in the climate action space, it's currently sitting at tokenism or a box to tick, whether you've had the youth voice or not, rather than treating us as valuable knowledge holders. So yeah, maybe that's a whakaaro I'll put to the rest of the group. Yeah, kia ora.
Hannah, do you have do you have something that you would like to say too before anybody else speaks?
Yeah, just really inspired by all our kōrero that's gone around in the space, but more so that usually the young people just sit and watch our old people do. Don't say anything, don't ask questions, just watch me and I'll do it. So tāku mahi he huri I tērā whakaaro, engari to still respect that way of thinking of our old people, just kati tō waha, mā koe mahi ngā mahi, māwe whai ngā mahi. Heoi, that I think we did come to a point in te ao Māori where we really craved that way of thinking of Indigenous knowledge, and we needed it to be tangible, to be felt, heard, talked about, not just monkey do, or monkey see, monkey do kind of stuff. So koina tāku is making sure that our Indigenous knowledge in one word is cool. Koina to young people. So koina tāku.
Kia ora, Hannah. It reminds me of some projects that, you know, many of us have probably seen, a sort of tuakana taina type projects where the role models are young people. Young people are looking up to their tuakana as the role models, and the role models aren't older people anymore. They're young. So I guess that's one thing that I would offer in response to what you two have just said, is that that we can create more spaces for and more publicity, I suppose, for young role models. And we can actually celebrate many more young role models. There are thousands of amazing young leaders that we could be we could be sharing their stories more. Anybody else like to follow on from that, kōrero?
I would just like to say that in the last election, we had a by-election, and so our youngest ever district councillor is 28. And so, with all due respect to that space changing up the age range, but a very, qualified, highly amazing young man stepped into that space. And so, I think one of the things that those of us who are in spaces that we hold, be it through a 3-year training or election, is how much are we making room for our young people to come in and to make a space that's been very much it's a terrible statement of fact, but pale and male, but it's often been stale because it's a system that forgets the joy of life and goodness and hope with regard to decision making. And often the spaces young people don't come into to speak up and have their say in have got a process that's quite boring, that's quite strict, that's quite agendaed, quite Western colonial and old school thinkings, whereas a wānanga hui with intergenerational kōrero means everybody comes to the table and everyone has their say, has the opportunity to share their thoughts, and everyone gets to do that, be it loud and robust or with song or with poetry or with whatever prose works. And that's what young people bring. Whenever young people come into the council chambers, I just get so excited because it's like, yes, youthful essence is here. So I would just say to you, beautiful young people, and to that wonderful young lady from the Mount I spoke to, that we need you to come into those spaces. It takes courage and it does take a bit of bold and brave, but if you've got someone in the mix like me for our young people in this region, then we will support you to do that sharing of your voice. Because as I said, when I listen to the rangatahi speaking at COP and those young people from those parts of the world that are suffering the loss of their landscape, their languages, their cultures being challenged right now. They don't want a 5-year plan, they want a now plan. And I think that adolescence and its youthful vigor whoop whoop kind of reminds us that now is the time. You can have your 10-year plans, you can have your 30-year plans, but right now I'm standing in front of you saying, will you help us do this now? And so I think it's time for lots of the spaces that young people aren't in to be actually to move people out, to bring youth in. And I think sometimes as adults, we have to be the people to be bold enough to say, let me get out of the way and let you come on in and do your thing, because it's going to be magical. That takes courage on both spaces, but that intergenerational knowledge should be about how proud we are to share in the spaces we have, but pass it on, because that's good. That's about mani motu hake in respect to whakapapa and courage to say whose voices are coming up now and how are we supporting that. So kia ora to you. And as I said, I get excited when I hear young people speak up, but I feel that my role as an adult, because we teach young people to speak truth, speak your mind, and then you get to be an adult and we tell you, keep it down. So I'm saying, don't keep it down, speak your truth, be proud of who you are, but let's find those spaces that we can open up and invite more of our rangatahi young people in. That's not just token, it's not just, oh, that was lovely, they came to see us. Let's actually make it count for change. And like I said, much respect to you young people. I know it's not easy, but trust me, even at my age, it's not easy either. But yeah, I think change is happening. I've been singing Change Gone Come by C.M. Cook. It's been my theme song, but change has to happen now. So kia ora.
Kia ora, Meredith. Kia ora, Meredith. Sorry, got a bit of a... anyone else like to have any final noticings, reflections? No? Oh, well, kia ora koutou. It's, yeah, it has been a very interesting kōrero and obviously many common themes around intergenerational connection and Indigenous wisdoms and tikanga that are so important now and that are really being valued in so many spaces. The call for change, and also I know young people are calling for change, but they're also making change. So, you know, not sitting around waiting for it, not sitting around waiting for governments to make decisions and councils to make decisions, but actually doing what needs to be done. So many adults are wanting to get in behind that, and I think that we do have a lot of support and a lot of intergenerational connection, definitely in our country here. So mihi to everybody for your whakaaro, mihi to you, Hana Rafiti and Hannah and Hannah and Charlene as well for everything that you're doing in this space and the leadership that and the role models that you are for other young people and for adults as well. And a mihi to all of our older generations too, and the experiences that we're bringing into these spaces, and the learning adventures that we're all on, and the many things we all still have to learn. So I will hand over to Shane now to close our hui with a karakia, and yes, mauri ora.
Karakia whakamutanga. Kua hikatea te kaupapa, kua takoto te wero. Me hoi tahi I runga I te whakaaro kotahi. E aki tō taua oranga, kia kaha. Ai mō te tuku taonga, ia tukui nā hia mō ka hikatea, tihei Māori ora. Ki te whaiao, ki te whaioranga e Māori ora. We have come to an awareness, the challenge lies before us. Let us work together as one. Stay well so that we may have the ability to manage success. Behold, here is the pathway to enlightenment and well-being. What a positive feeling. Pau Māori.
The University of Waikato is proud to introduce the world's first Bachelor of Climate Change for the people who know there is no Planet B. Gain the skills needed for the jobs of tomorrow. Contribute to a fundamental shift in the way we do business and go about our lives. Explore how Mātauranga Māori can bring perspective to the most pressing issue of our time. Apply now and carve a career where passion and purpose collide.